Welcome to The Fighter. My name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you so much for watching this new show. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to like this video online. Go subscribe to Juno News so you get a lot of exclusive content. And most importantly, share with your friends who need to know. Okay, this is a situation on the ground in Alberta. We still have around 700,000 students who are out of school, because there is an Alberta teachers strike. Now, the Alberta Teachers Union says that they have around 51,000 teachers in their ranks. If you do an actual head count, according to government data, there's around 35 active duty frontline in the classroom teachers who are teaching. So that's the situation we're in right now. The teachers, generally speaking, from the union's perspective, are asking for more money and a hard classroom cap size across the province. Two things there. The Alberta government was offering a pretty sizable pay increase for the Alberta teachers. They were offering between 12 and I think it was up to even 17% in some cases of a raise over 4 years. Basically, under that rejected deal, a teacher in Alberta would start at around $71,000 per year. After 7 years on the job, they're already making over $100,000 a year. Plus vacation, plus benefits, plus time off, all of that stuff, okay? Plus really solid job security, especially when you're comparing that to other professions in Alberta. So that was apparently the offer from the government that the teachers union then rejected. Just recently, the teachers union came back with, how about you spend $2 billion more over and above the 2.6 or 2.7 billion that the government had already earmarked for this. I got to be real clear here. Alberta is in debt. We've got a big multi-billion-dollar deficit this fiscal year. This year, we are on track to have a provincial debt of well over $80 billion, okay, with a B. What the teachers union came back and said, hey, how about you spend $2 billion more? That was just unreasonable. And you could kind of sense a shift, actually, in a lot of the public of like, okay, whoa, that's way too much. And so after the teachers union came back and said, give us $2 billion more, the government said, okay, listen, how about Monday morning, teachers go back to work and back on payroll because they're not getting paid right now. They've got bills coming due. How about teachers go back to work in class with students first thing Monday morning, but we keep on talking. So deal's not done, but how about we go do enhanced mediation with the teachers union, but y'all are back in class, okay, and earning your paychecks. Apparently, the Alberta Teachers Union said no to that right away, but we're hearing from rank and file frontline teachers that they weren't asked about that one. That's when Alberta Premier Danielle Smith took to the podium, and here's part of what she had to say.
With the 12 to 17% raise that was recently rejected by ATA, teachers' salaries would have started at $70,916 and go up to $119,033. This would have made them the best paid teachers in Western Canada after provincial taxes. We offered to hire an additional 3,000 new teachers over the term of the contract, which would help alleviate classroom sizes on top of the $8.6 billion investment we made this year to build 130 schools. The ATA's latest offer would have cost taxpayers an additional $2 billion on top of the $2.6 billion that we have already committed, a total of $4.6 billion. Our province is facing a $6.5 billion budget deficit this year, and we must continue to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. After about 3 weeks, a strike of this nature would reach the threshold of causing irreparable harm to our students' education. The ATA needs to do this for its members and for all students. If it refuses to do so, we will consider other options to bring the strike to an end.
Now, what the Premier was saying there with irreparable harm, so a few things. The legislature isn't sitting today, but it's going to start sitting very soon, again, in Edmonton. So that means that it sounds like the Alberta government is going to take further action. And as a parent who has students in the Alberta school system, what I think the Premier meant there by irreparable harm is, for example, grade 12 students are getting notices right now that their diploma exams in British Columbia, they would have called them provincial finals. In other jurisdictions, basically what these are province-wide exam level tests for the end of your course in your grade 12 year. Usually those exams count for a big chunk of your final grade, which of course matters if you're going on to trade school, college, university, etc. Some students are now getting notices saying that your diploma, your final exams will become optional. What does that mean when you're applying to maybe a university outside of Alberta that doesn't understand what's been going on with this job action? We don't know. So that's what the Premier was getting at there. Okay, we're hearing a lot from the government side here, right? Yeah, for sure. What about the teachers? Why haven't we heard from the Alberta Teachers Union? Why haven't we heard from teachers? Hold that thought. We're going to talk to one in a second. But first, let's listen to this from our sponsor.
This is a campaign called Unsmoke. Look, folks, it's time to modernize Canada's rules on nicotine. Alternatives to cigarettes like heated tobacco, vaping products, and oral smokeless products don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. They aren't risk-free, but the growing body of scientific evidence shows that they have the potential to be substantially less harmful than smoking. Despite this, Canadians are banned access to critical information and even some products. Nicotine pouches remain banned in convenience stores, and current laws ban communication about the risks of these products compared to cigarettes. It's unbelievable. The evidence is here. The tools exist. Canadians should have the freedom to know. You can learn more by visiting unsmoke.ca.
Okay, as promised, it was late last week and I was working on some, capacity analysis for different schools, trying to see how much hard classroom size caps wind up costing taxpayers. Because at the Taxpayers Federation, we want government to run more efficiently. And everything we'd been told is that these hard cookie cutter class size caps across Alberta would cost a lot of money for taxpayers and not actually deliver the results that a lot of parents and teachers want. Then my phone rang, and it was coming from an Alberta teacher who is usually right in the thick of it in downtown Edmonton trying to teach grade 11 English. What does she have to say? Let's find out. Joining me now is a teacher from Edmonton. Now, you gave me a call late last week and you were understandably upset. Can you please explain for our audience what is upsetting you about the current situation?
Well, what happened was I got an email from the ATA stating that the government had come back with another proposal. This was after we had rejected their offer. And the government came back and suggested in their proposal that teachers should return to work on Monday, October 20th, and that they would appoint another independent mediator to do an enhanced mediation to try to resolve some of the issues where we're really far apart. And the ATA arbitrarily rejected that offer without consulting teachers. And because that's directly impacts our paychecks, I think that teachers should have had the opportunity to say yes or no. I don't think the ATA should have arbitrarily made that decision for us.
So to put it in layman's terms, the government was basically saying, listen, teachers can be back at work today, Monday, getting a paycheck, getting paid in front of their students in classrooms, but we're still going to keep negotiating at the table during this. Like, it's not over, but you can all go back to work while still earning a paycheck. Is that generally what was being offered?
That is my understanding as I read that proposal, yes.
Me too. Okay. Can you just give us a little bit of background as to, how long have you been teaching? What do you teach? I know that you're in Edmonton. What's it like for you right now as a teacher?
I've been teaching with Edmonton Public Schools for 15 years now. I started in 2012. I teach at an urban high school in North Edmonton, and I teach English language arts. So just to give you an idea of what my day is like, I teach 4 classes in a row every day. I get 40 minutes for lunch. In my 4 classes, my first class in the morning, I have 33 students. It's a regular streamed English class. Out of those 33 students, 13 of them are either coded learning disability or an English language learner. My second block class is a 30 level course, and there's 31 in that class, and 10 of them are coded or ELL. My block 3 class is a 30-1 class. There's 32 students in that, and only 2 of them are coded learning disability, that's reasonable. I don't mind that. My block 4 class is the big problem. There's 37 in that one, and 19 of them are either coded or English language learner. So that's 51% of my class that is either coded or is English as a second language. So, and I do this day in, day out, every day. We don't get any prep anymore. That got taken away from us several years ago. And so it's a tough work day.
It sounds like a tough work day, especially when you're talking about what the word that people are using is complexities. And then you're using a word there, coded. And I've looked at some of earlier collective bargain agreements where I've been reading through different agreements. And my understanding is that coded students, they literally have a code. And that is based on their ability to learn, maybe some language deficiencies, things like that. It's types of disabilities, right, that certain students might have. That's what coded means.
Yeah, coding means any kind of diagnosed learning disability. So it could also be behavioral as well. And so, yeah, there's a code that goes with every kind of learning disability. There's autism, there's things like dyslexia, and then there's just straight behavior problems as well. So, and those can also be coded.
Now, I have to ask you, we were chatting last week. My daughter, unfortunately, she's missing Hamlet right now. She's in her English year, she's in her English class, and she's missing out on Hamlet. You were saying you teach English. What do you like teaching the most when you're actually in the classroom?
Well, I kind of have a passion for Shakespeare. I love his stories. I think that stories is how we learn how to deal with adversity in our life. So I love reading and I love literature because I think students can learn so much from reading about what others have dealt with and had to gone through and the lessons learned from it. I also like helping students with reading comprehension because thanks to technology, kids nowadays don't read the way they used to, and reading comprehension is definitely a problem for a lot of students. So those are my 2 areas of passion.
They're a really big deal. I'm a huge reader myself, so is my husband, our whole family is, but you're right. With all the technology now, it feels like you're constantly battling the screen. And I must say, like, my grade 11 English teacher, the way she taught us Lord of the Flies, it'll stay with me for the rest of my life. She turned the lights off. She had us sit in the middle of a circle. She had a lantern right next to the person who was reading. It had a huge impact, and I can guarantee you it had a huge impact on every kid in that class. And so I think I speak on behalf of most parents in Alberta, where they would rather have their kids in school right now, to put things nicely. They would rather have a deal with the teachers. Now, I have to ask you, from what we're hearing from the government side of things, they were offering what looked like a pretty fair pay raise to a lot of people, where they're saying, hey, you'd start at about $71,000 a year. After 7 years in, you're making around $100,000 a year. They also use the language of they would become the highest paid teachers in Western Canada after taxes. To be fair, I did email the ATA asking, did you guys really come back and ask for $2 billion more dollars? Like, is this true? And I have not heard back yet. What do you think of the current offer coming from the government?
Well, from a salary aspect, there's no way to catch up over 10 years of erosion and not keeping up with inflation. It's unrealistic to expect this government to do that, especially given the fact that we've got a huge deficit in the province now. So I thought the offer was fair. For me personally, it would amount to, by the 4th year, an increase of 14%, which is, who gets that in the public sector, right? Nobody. So I thought that was fair. As far as the complexity issue, I think the Premier was pretty straightforward in recognizing that there are issues with complexity in the classrooms. And I believe her that she is going to work with us and try to resolve some of those issues. Building new schools is definitely going to help. Hiring new teachers and EAs is definitely going to help. But I think that this is a problem that you can't fix in one bargaining round. And you can't expect this government to make up for years of underfunding by previous governments either.
You mentioned the complexities thing. Can that be worked on by targeting the funding, focusing the funding on more EAs, and maybe giving teachers more say at the classroom level as to how many kids with complexities are in their classes, and then really focusing more on special education? Because from a layman's perspective, I think one of the stumbling blocks here is that the premier is coming back with things like, let's focus funding on things like special education and making sure that we, deal with class sizes where they're a problem. And what I'm hearing, at least in the media from the union, is more of a, let's have a blanket class size cap across the province. They seem to be at those two polar ends of things. Do you think that things like the complexities issue and the class sizes issues, like that last class you're teaching there, that sounds like pretty overwhelming. Can that be focused upon in order to fix it without just doing blanket class size caps across the province? What do you think?
I don't think a class size cap is a realistic thing to strive for. A, because our population continues to grow. And B, because, how do you do that? Every school is different. A class size cap that works in one school won't work in a smaller school, for example, because you'll end up having split classes in a bigger school, and it just muddies the waters too much. Focusing funds on where they're needed is a really good idea, but I think the government has been giving lots of money towards classroom and sizes and things. I'm just not so sure the money's going where it's supposed to. That's where my disconnect comes in.
I didn't mention this before, but over the weekend, when you mentioned where money is going, I was scratching my head because I was looking at some data. Now, it's about a year and a half old, to be fair, but I was looking at some capacity data on different schools. So within the same thing, like public, Catholic, Catholic. And I was looking at some of their capacities within the same cities. So Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer. And I could find some schools that were over capacity, like, they got 47 too many kids or 52 too many kids. And like a 6-minute bus ride away, they've got room for like 150. Now, it was one of those things where I was scratching my head going, why aren't administrators figuring this out? Is that up to the board? Sorry if you don't know the answer to this question. Isn't that where some of the planning and the funding needs to go, is to figure this out without necessarily having to come back with, let's give $2 billion more to this problem?
Yeah, my own personal opinion on this is that I think that the reason why we're seeing that effect of some schools being really over has to do partly with the way our neighborhoods are laid out, and like, for example, if you live in a certain neighborhood, you're not allowed to go to a school in another neighborhood. They close the boundaries, right? I think that's part of it, but I think also it's where all new people to Canada are being funneled, and that's what true. Neighborhoods they're gravitating to live in. I think that also contributes. Our high school, for example, I believe was built to house about 1,300 students, maybe 1,400. We're at 1,700 this year. So wow. For the first time since I've worked there, we had to close enrollment, and we're only accepting new students who move into that actual neighborhood. But we're definitely over what our building is supposed to house. Like, there's no spare classrooms anywhere.
Wow. Okay. See, it's so good to actually get your report from the ground where you're actually teaching and you're seeing the school. Just a couple more questions for you. Last we left off, the last we heard from the government is what you just described of the different pay raises. Apparently, they were also offering to hire 3,000 more teachers, 1,500 new educational assistants. So, people who help in the classrooms. And then we heard to come back from the teachers union, how about $2 billion more, like over and above what the government had already earmarked for this? You mentioned the deficit. You're right. I think a lot of people heard last year's fiscal year end with the surplus and they got confused.
Mhm.
That's not what we're dealing with right now. You're right. We're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar deficit for this fiscal year, and we are on track to have a debt of more than $84 billion with a B. What did you think of the teachers union coming back and saying spend $2 billion more?
Well, they're not being realistic. And I'm kind of caught in between a
I
rock
know.
and a hard place, because I'm a teacher, and I do realize that we have issues in right now, but I'm also a taxpayer and a conservative. And so I can't sit there and support that kind of a request. I mean, it's absolutely fiscally irresponsible. No, any government who would do it would be held to under a microscope for doing it, and it's just not fiscally responsible or achievable right now. Like, it just isn't, right. This government has invested so much in education since they took power, and they're building 90 new schools over the next 7 years. So you can only do so many things, like the money isn't getting printed, at the legislature and doled out. And we've already seen what happens when you print money with our Liberal government, right? Look at the problems we're having right now because of that. So I just don't think it was reasonable to ask for that kind of money.
Fair. And what you're getting at there with the problems is inflation.
Mm.
It's one of the reasons why everything costs so much. And for people who don't know, at the federal level, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government printed like $300 billion out of thin air over a couple of years. It was astonishing. It's one
Mhm.
of the reasons that we have an inflation issue. Speaking of money, just for folks who need the math, I went back to the 2021-2022 budget. Okay. You look at the fiscal year end. That's where you find out how much they spent on education as a line item. You fast forward to today for the budget. Okay. These are forecasts, but that's what they're planning on spending. The increase is 33%. So since 2021-22 fiscal year end to now, what they're spending this fiscal year is an increase in education spending by 33%. And I checked, it does eclipse inflation, and it does eclipse student population growth. And so, to your point, there's only one taxpayer in Alberta, and I'm worried that people are getting at loggerheads and they're not actually conversing with each other. And so it really matters to me and to this audience that you're speaking with us this way. I must say, over the weekend, I bumped into one of my daughter's favorite teachers. I'm worried for her because I know that teachers apparently aren't getting strike pay.
Nope.
You've got bills. You're a human being.
Yeah.
So is there an opening? Sorry I didn't ask you this before, but is there an opening with your union if enough teachers say, "Hey, I want to say on this," could they get back to work and then get a paycheck while still negotiating? Is that still an option? Because I'm thinking about the bills coming due.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything. I check the news every day, which is another issue that I have, is that we're not getting enough communication from the union or the ATA about what's going on. As far as I know, I'm sure the government, if we were to say, yeah, we changed our minds, we'll take it, let's do this, they would probably say, yes, we could probably be back at work tomorrow. But it's like silence out there. I haven't heard anything from anybody. So I think they're digging in, and they're just saying, nope, we're just going to dig in, because they think they're going to magically get something that they're not. I don't think they're going to get. And I'm the one who's going to suffer, because come November 1st, I can't pay my bills.
My goodness. Not to put you on the spot and without exactly identifying your union or your reps, for people who don't know, because I don't know, if you wanted to speak to your union leadership, like, what's the mechanism? Like, do you email them as a teacher? Is there like a one question surveys that are put out? Like, what's the mechanism between the union that is speaking for you and frontline teachers like you?
I have to email my reps for my area, which
Okay.
is on my list of things to do. I was going to do that today as soon as I could, to find out what's going on and where their thought process is, and to see if they want to pay my bills for the month of November. Because when I look at what I pay in union dues, I went back through my T4 slips since I started teaching, and I have paid $16,425 in union dues between 2012 and last year's tax return. And if you look at, if there's 35,000 teachers, to use the Premier's numbers in Alberta, and they're all paying around that amount of money, where did all that money go? Why don't we have strike pay? You know, where did all of my union dues go? And why can't I access them when I need them? Right?
And just to be clear then, that isn't paying into like your benefits. That's not for your dental and your glasses.
No, this is just straight union dues. It shows on my T4 slip as union dues. So,
wow.
So where's my money going, and how is it being spent?
These are really good questions. I really appreciate your time today. I'm going to leave you with this question. If you could speak to fellow teachers, because I imagine some of y'all are feeling kind of isolated right now. If you could speak to fellow teachers who are in your situation right now, what would you say?
Well, I would just encourage people to speak up. And if you're not happy with what the government or what the ATA is doing, say something. Because if you don't say anything, then they assume that you're on their side and you agree with them. And there was just under 20% of us who didn't want to strike to start with. Well, maybe now that number's higher. Maybe more people need their paycheck back. So people need to speak up and email your reps.
For everyone's sake, for yours, for parents, for students, for taxpayers, I really hope you're back teaching Shakespeare very soon.
I'm sure my students wouldn't agree with you there, but I do.
Thank you so much for your time. You take care.
Okay, thanks, Kris. You too.
Wow. What did you think of that? She phoned me straight up on her own time, upset late last week when she got a hold of the letter that was then publicly made knowledge of from the government that was offering, hey, if you want to go back to work on Monday, we don't have a deal yet, but if you want to go back to work on Monday, teachers, we'll keep bargaining at the table, but you're going to be in the classroom and getting paid and students can keep learning. And she phoned me upset, understandably so, and basically said what she said there of let's work out a deal, but at the end of the day, teachers need to be back at work and students deserve to be learning in the classroom. What did you think about her explaining that last class that she has during the day with those complexities where it sounds like around 50% or half of her class have English as a second language or, different disabilities? That sounds like a lot of people and a lot of students to try to manage that way. Do you think focusing the funding and the attention specifically on those target areas of things like more help for special education, more help for teaching ESL classes so they're not just put suddenly into trying to learn Shakespeare in grade 11, do you think that is the answer? Because so many times I'm hearing from analysts who are saying province-wide cookie-cutter classroom sizes don't work because they become inefficient, super expensive for taxpayers, and you wind up with split classes galore. And it doesn't usually fix the problem. Why not focus the funding in those high-growth, high-population dense areas? Why not focus the funding and the nimbleness on things like more special education and ESL so that teachers like we just heard from can actually teach? Thank you so much for watching this special episode of The Fighter with Kris Sims. Be sure to like this video if you're watching online. Be sure to head on over and subscribe to Juno News so you can get more first-person stories like this. Because at the end of the day, we're fighting for you.